relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. One of my personal favorite unbeaten up-and-comers was in action this past weekend on the undercard of CBS's last fight. Young Carolyn Dubois, who debuted as a professional this year in February, racked up her 5th professional victory as a pugilist opposite the ring. Sophia Rodriguez, who she battered in the first round, forced a referee stoppage. This is year 1 for Carolyn as a professional. Year 1 as a pugilist. And given her age, the fact that she's only 21 years old, and she's exhibiting the kind of ceiling that she's exhibiting, I don't think they need to rush her. I don't think they need to move her fast, in spite of her amateur pedigree. I think they should get her all the professional experience that she needs so that what happened to Mary Spencer this past weekend doesn't happen to her. It's easy to get carried away when you have a fighter. It happens in women's boxing the same as it happens in men's boxing. Vasyl Lomachenko opposite the ring, Orlando Salido, a bit too early in his professional career based on his amateur exploits. What happened to Natasha Jonas years ago at the hands of Vivian Obanov. And that shock upset loss, that shock upset knockout. What happened more recently to Mary Spencer this past Friday north of the border in Canada. It was far too soon for her to be opposite the ring. Femke Hermans, a former champion, and Mary found that out the hard way. Mary and her team. Mary was about 7-0 going into that fight. Going into that fight with that former champion. Carolyn Dubois is about 5-0 now. 5 wins, no losses, and no draws with 4 knockouts. And she's looking the part. She's looking amazing. Brilliant every time she gets out there. But she doesn't need to worry about world titles after just 1 year as a professional or getting in line for them. You've got a 21-year-old fighter that has one of the highest ceilings of any up-and-comer in the sport today. Take your time. Take your time because you can. Take your time because you have it. These blue-chip prospects and amateur standouts have moved fast because they've had extended amateur careers. Vasyl Lomachenko, people like that. But you know, he was about 25 years old when he debuted as a professional. Carolyn here and now is about 4 years younger than he was.
So what's the rush?
Irrespective of where a sanctioning body might be ranking her and when they deem it appropriate for a title fight to happen, irrespective of any of those things, the focus is on the fighter and developing the fighter. And so far, Carolyn Dubois is plowing through whoever you put in front of her. So get her more fights, get her more rounds in the bank, because that's what she needs more than a rank, more than an alphabet title.
Carolyn Dubois is the future.
She's got plenty of time to get there, plenty of time to develop, so use it. Even if you favor her to batter most any other fighter out there, most any other former champion or champion, how many people favored Mary Spencer to plow through Femke Hermans? Years before that, how many people favored amateur standout Natasha Jonas, Ms. Great Britain, to plow through Vivian Obanov? Needless to say, things didn't go to plan in either of those fights, so you have to tread carefully or suffer the repercussions for being overzealous and obtuse. You got one hell of a fighter, one hell of a prospect in sweet Carolyn Dubois, and because she's so young, you can take your time, you know. So why don't you? There's no hurry. There's no rush to get her a rank or get her to an alphabet title.
No rush.
No rush to turn her into a headliner, a big marquee attraction, a big marquee draw. What you do is you stick her on as many undercards as you can. Allow her to develop in front of everybody, fight by fight. So by the time she's ready to fight for a title, she will have already amassed the following. The way she's looking, the way she's fighting, how she's getting girls out of there. She's got a fan-friendly style.
She's the complete package, really.
She's everything you want. Young, with a high ceiling, noticeable skill set, and real stopping power.
I do have a soft spot for a spiteful southpaw.
You have to love them. The approach must be tailored to the fighter. Some other fighters, depending on their age and the state of their weight class, may have to be moved differently, but young Carolyn Dubois is only 21 years old.
4 of her last 5 fights haven't gone the distance.
She's only fought for a full 6 rounds once. She hasn't even fought in an 8-rounder, let alone a 10-rounder, so you move her gradually. Take your time. Put her in there with a couple of world title challengers, then step her up to former champions.
There's no shortage of them at these weights. Lightweight, talent-rich divisions, the lightweight division, the super lightweight division. There's plenty of action to go around.
And plenty of opponents. I would like to see Carolyn keep this schedule of activity next year. She fought 5 times this year. I'd like to see her fight 5 times, 4 to 5 times next year. Obviously, they can step her up, move her gradually, but the key word here is gradually.
She's very young. There's no rush.
In men's light heavyweight news, top-rank impresario Bob Arum says, "I'm not going to let any network problems stop a fight that should be made," in reference to the undisputed light heavyweight title fight between Dimitri Bivol and the winner of Beterbiev versus Yard.
And for the sake of that fight, let's hope that the winner is Artur Beterbiev, because if it's Anthony Yard, I don't think it happens.
Bob Arum has taken a more diplomatic approach to one of the most intriguing but politically snake-bitten fights in boxing. Earlier this year, Arum made some prickly comments in regards to making a light heavyweight undisputed championship between his charge, WBO, WBC, IBF champion Artur Beterbiev, and WBA titleist and fellow Russian Dimitri Bivol, who is promoted by Eddie Hearn of Matchroom. Interest in that fight has been at an all-time high since Beterbiev added the IBF title to his wares by stopping Joe Smith.
I think they meant the WBO title. The IBF title is actually the very first title that Artur ever won many, many years ago, the then vacant IBF title.
More recently, he won the WBO title, the brown belt, from then WBO champion Joe Smith Jr. Making the fight between Artur and Dimitri is problematic since both fighters are aligned with rival promotional entities that crucially have their own network deals. Top Rank has an exclusive deal to showcase their fighters on ESPN, and Matchroom has a similar one with DAZN. After the Smith fight, Arum told BoxingScene.com that he had no intention of letting Beterbiev fight Bivol on DAZN, citing the platform's middling viewership.
I never bought that excuse. Bob Arum is only now coming around to the idea of a Beterbiev versus Bivol fight, as it was Bob Arum himself last year who called Dimitri Bivol boring and poured cold water on the idea of making that fight.
A lot has happened since then that has likely helped to warm Bob Arum to the notion of making such a fight.
One thing with Beterbiev is that now he is known to the public, and so many people have seen him. We ain't doing a fight on Dead Zone, which nobody watches.
It's what Bob Arum had to say about it before, though now, in a recent interview, Arum seemed to back off from that initial stance. Arum did not offer specifics on how a compromise could be made that could satisfy both sides, but he stated unequivocally that he would not allow network issues to be an impediment. In any case, a Beterbiev versus Bivol fight, if it can be made, would not happen until the tail end of next year, Arum said, because he suspects Bivol will try to fight Canelo Alvarez in a rematch in the fall. Bivol defeated the Mexican superstar via unanimous decision this past May, even though Dimitri Bivol himself has stated quite plainly he wants the undisputed fight more than the Canelo rematch. He is not closing a door to a Canelo rematch.
But he said it himself when he spoke to Steve Kim. He wants the undisputed fight more. He wants more belts.
We talked about that here on the channel.
If a Bivol fight is to be made, it won't be until the end of the year, because I think Bivol is looking for a rematch with Canelo Alvarez, which would be a lot more lucrative for him. As you said, this is way down the road. We'll figure that out. No reason it can't be figured out. I'm not gonna let any network problem stop a fight that should be made. But that is for tomorrow.
In the meantime, Beterbiev will defend his light heavyweight titles against WBO mandatory challenger Anthony Yard at the Oval Arena in Wembley, London on January 28th. Recently, the WBC confirmed that Liverpool's Callum Smith, a former titleist at super middleweight, is the mandatory challenger for the winner of Beterbiev versus Yard, although the sanctioning body refrained from officially ordering a fight between the two.
We've talked about that also, Callum Smith's role in all of this and how that might be an impediment to the undisputed title fight.
Callum has gone on to say that we might see him in action at least one more time before he challenges for the title against the winner of Beterbiev versus Yard, and we'll see who they conjure up for him. I don't imagine it'll be a risky fight, a particularly risky fight, because he's on the cusp of fighting for a title.
He definitely needs to get out there, and he definitely needs to keep busy, because irrespective of who wins in January, the winner of that fight, regardless of who it is, they're not going to return to action for some months, and it's already been some months since Callum last fought.
Callum was last in action in August of this year. The winner of Beterbiev versus Yard won't emerge until January of next year. And how many more months will it take for the winner to return to action in order to face him? Thus, he doesn't want to let too much time pass without him seeing action before he challenges the winner of that fight. So he's likely going to take on a keep busy fight against a keep busy kind of opponent, just to keep the tools sharp.
But you see what the problem is. You see the impediment that Callum is looking to get the winner of that fight in the ring in the third or fourth quarter of next year. At the same time, that's when Bob Arum expects the Bivol fight might be viable.
As far as Arum, the 91-year-old likes the sound of a Beterbiev versus Smith fight should Beterbiev, as he is expected to, end up getting past Yard on January 28th.
Well, that's good. Callum Smith is a good fighter. If we get by this fight against Yard, why not take Callum Smith? Today, I don't have a problem with Callum Smith. I won't have that problem, so I'm content with that.
This is on the premise that Dimitri Bivol wants a Canelo rematch more than a Beterbiev showdown, but Dimitri Bivol himself has already said he prefers to take on Artur than take on Canelo for a second time.
So we'll see if Bob holds true to his word that he's not going to let network politics get in the way of a fight that needs to be made, because that's the fight that needs to be made more than the Smith fight.
When was the last time the light heavyweight division had an undisputed champion? You know, undisputed in more recent years, previous era, that was supposed to be decided between the Crusher, Sergey Kovalev, and Superman, Adonis Stevenson. Needless to say, network politics got in the way of that fight.
It never happened, and I don't want to see that happen to this fight. Beterbiev versus Bivol is a lot more important than Beterbiev versus Smith.
I think that's something that most boxing fans, if not all boxing fans, would agree on, which is saying a lot because boxing fans, generally speaking, don't agree on anything.
Any true fan of the sport would agree that the undisputed light heavyweight title fight takes precedence over a run-of-the-mill mandatory challenger, even if it is Callum Smith, and even if it is a decent fight. Bivol versus Beterbiev is the better fight. It's the only fight.
It's the only fight to make it light heavyweight. For Artur, it's the only fight to make because he's not getting any younger. Dimitri himself gave a very sobering take on a potential Beterbiev fight. It depends on our promoters. Can't just say, I want to fight this guy.
On several occasions already, Dimitri has made it clear that he'd prefer to vie for undisputed than face Canelo Alvarez for a second time, but he's right.
The promoters are the ones who have to make it happen. Of course, it depends on promoter. Mine and the guy who is my opponent, Bivol said on the DAZN boxing show. I can't just say, I want to fight this guy. They can listen to me, or they can think about business.
Bivol suggested that he is tired of defending his lone WBA title. Earlier this month, Bivol said that an Alvarez payday did not interest him as much as the prospect of burnishing his legacy by taking on Beterbiev.
Of course, for my legacy, it's better to fight for another belt, Bivol said. I've made 10 defenses, of course I want more. I want to feel that I fight for something else, not just defending my title.
See what I'm talking about?
Dimitri Bivol may want the fight. He may want the Beterbiev fight more than the Canelo fight, but the Beterbiev people need to be on board, and while Bob Arum is seemingly coming around to that idea,
under no certain circumstances do we know that he's going to make that fight.
Bivol, who turns 32 in December, is aware of the dangerous proposition that is Beterbiev. The Montreal-based heavyweight is slated to defend his belts against Anthony Yard January 28th at the Wembley Arena in London. With fighters like Beterbiev, you have to be focused every single second of the fight, Bivol said. Everything. It's hard work to be focused for 36 minutes. You get tired. When you're focused, you spend more energy. He's a good fighter. Of course, you have to be ready for him. You have to be ready to be focused the whole fight.
Because with his kind of punch and power, you can end it at any moment in the fight with a single punch.
Artur Beterbiev may be several years older than Dimitri Bivol, but he's still by far and wide the biggest puncher in this division. And power, as they say, is the last thing to go.
A Canelo fight is a much safer fight for Dimitri than a Beterbiev fight. Canelo Alvarez himself says,
I wasn't 100% in the Bivol fight. He can't give anything more. I can.
The Canelo fight is not only a safer fight, but a bigger money fight for Dimitri.
There had been some talk of Canelo making Bivol drop down to 168 pounds to fight for the undisputed super middleweight championship. However, Canelo states that he wants another crack at capturing Bivol's belt. Same weight. That's it. Canelo said in an interview with La Saga, according to Izquierdazo, "Of course I can win. It's not a matter of belief. It's because I know I can. That's my priority now." Very recently, Mexican legend Julio Cesar Chavez advised Canelo to avoid a rematch with Bivol because he might lose again.
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way.
"I have respect for Chavez," replied Canelo. "I will always respect him. The champion knows that. But in the end, it's not a matter of what he wants." Canelo states he's focused on that rematch because he feels he was not 100% in the first fight. He recently underwent surgery for a wrist injury that he says had hindered him in properly preparing for Bivol. "That is something I want to do. I know I can win," Canelo said, "because I know how I went into that fight. I know what I can do, and I know what I will do. I couldn't do things properly because I didn't train as I wanted to, because of my injured hand and all of that."
Well, look, going into a fight with an injured hand certainly can affect things. Though it was Canelo Alvarez's gas tank that caught my attention. It seemed to me that in spite of Dimitri Bivol not really being the biggest puncher at 175 pounds, every time he touched Canelo Alvarez with a shot, he took something out of him.
He is bigger than Canelo Alvarez, naturally bigger. Size matters.
I lacked 1 or 2 rounds to win. It was highly competitive.
That's not how most other people would describe it. I will admit that Canelo versus Bivol was more competitive than Zerto versus Bivol, though both men lost clearly.
Ask around.
Since I couldn't have a proper training camp, I won the early rounds and began to get tired. At the end, I'm sure I didn't give my 100%, and he did. He, Bivol, can't give any more, and I can.
And I disagree. The Dimitri Bivol I saw that night didn't get out of first gear because he didn't have to.
If you push the pace, stand in front of him more, and open up more, that's just that many more countering opportunities for Dimitri. That's the way I see it. It's not because Canelo Alvarez isn't a great fighter. He is a great fighter, but I think he's hit his ceiling at light heavyweight, and he was biting off more than he could chew.
Dimitri Bivol's natural size and durability over Canelo, coupled with a very pesky base style that doesn't do Canelo any favors.
Listen, if it were up to me, I'd rather see Bivol versus Beterbiev.
That's what I think, but Canelo don't care what I think, or Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. for that matter.